Arizona Department of Environmental Quality Water Watch Program. Her group monitors and reports basic water quality markers and fish observations in the river in Santa Cruz County every month. Connie says that when you are connected to a place, it just has to be a place you love. And for her, it's the Santa Cruz River. So now I present Connie Williams to you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I know where that little quote came from. I mean, thank you. There was a Sonoran Institute little feature thing. I bet that's where that came from. I mean, I do say that, but thank you. That's very nice. And I'm delighted to be here. This is my group, so it's an honor to be able to talk to you about something that is so important and is making headlines. Tony Davis does a pretty good job of reporting stuff in the Arizona Daily Star, but there's a little bit more to it than sometimes we get in Happy Talk. I looked up the Green Valley Water Department, the Green Valley Water website. And if you read that, it just sounds like, no problem. We got this figured out. Arizona's got the best laws in the country for water. And I've heard other talks like that, you know, where EPCOR's been out, just, we got it made. We just chill, everybody. There's no problems. That's not the whole story. So I'm going to share my screen and set up my PowerPoint. And we are going to talk about more than one of Arizona's water challenges. But in order to do that, I think we really need to talk about where we get our water to begin with. This is a lovely little graph, really like the colors, from Arizona Department of Water Resources. And they say that 40% of our water is coming from the ground. Now, we need to remember that that water was very slowly built up over millions of years. There's a little bit of recharge to the aquifers from rain and surface water that goes into it, but basically we are mining our savings account in that when we use it. Fortunately, we've got almost the same amount, 39% of Colorado River water. Now, Colorado River is from the Four Corners state, Wyoming. That's kind of the source of it here, or at least bits of the source of it. The upper basin is dark blue. The lower basin also includes a little bit of Nevada and a little bit of California. We, of course, have the Central Arizona Canal that goes through Phoenix and then through Tucson that supplies the water for the big metropolitan areas. So that's a good thing. We have a surprising amount of surface water, 19%. You can see there's a lot of rivers around Phoenix, and that helps Phoenix with its enormous population deal with not pumping quite so much groundwater. And we've got 2%, which is a really respectable number of use for effluent and wastewater. Now, oh, don't do this. This problem earlier. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop the share and put this thing. I apologize for this. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, I think we've got it back. I had that problem this morning and I just thought I had it all fixed. I wasn't worried about it. Should have been. Okay, so we've gotten through that slide. This is where I wanted to be. So we said 39%, and our allocation, because this water has been agreed on how it will be shared, is 2.8 million acre feet per year. Yeah, those of you who can spell acre know that they in that little graph got it wrong.
Yes,
But
sir.
2.8 million is our allotment. We'll talk in a minute about why that's problematic. About half of that actually goes to the Central Arizona project. That's our allotment for 2021, about 1.3 million acre feet. Now, the problem with the allotment is detailed in this nice little chart, and I highly recommend this. The College of Science lecture series, this was last April it came out. It was Water, the Colorado River. Part 3 was hosted by Connie Woodhouse. Dr. Woodhouse is a lecturer in the Department of Geography, and she is also a researcher in the Tree Ring Lab. And they have been able to go to Lee's Ferry. Lee's Ferry is just downstream from the dam at Lake Powell. They have been able to reconstruct pretty much what's coming down the Colorado River since the mid 700s, which is quite remarkable that they've been able to do that. Now you can see that there's wide fluctuations in this graph between, you know, in some years you go from a really low point to a really high point from year to year. That happens. This particular little spot though, you can see that there was well above average flow, maybe even in the whole course in 700s, well above average flow right here. And what's that law? Murphy's Law. This happened to be the period of study when the Bureau of Reclamation did 20 years of looking at how much water was coming down the Colorado River so they could determine allocations to the various states in the Colorado River Compact. And they felt like they had a winning number. They'd studied it for 20 years, but it was just unfortunately a kind of a wet 20 years. The other thing we can learn from this graph is over here. You can see these orange bars represent drought periods, and this period,
well, I think what we'll do is we'll move along, and again, if
yeah, this period right here was an extensive drought. It lasted longer than 25 years, or about 25 years, and it was so bad that the Pueblo cultures were forced to leave Arizona. They were pretty well adapted to Arizona's vagaries. So that is a pretty serious thing right here. We are equaling this very serious drought, except that this drought was a cool drought, and the drought we're having right now is a hot drought. We had a drought starting in 2020. It is still with us in 2022. I just want to point out any color here is some level of drought, but the brick red is extreme. It is really exceptional drought. And we saw last June, before the monsoon season started, that a good part of the Colorado River Compact states, the Colorado River Basin states, were in exceptional drought, the highest level. Now we had good rains. We're looking at February, you know, this month. We've lost a lot of that brick red color, but look how much more of the country is now impacted by drought. We're not real surprised to see that, even though we're not pleased to see it. There was a study of the assessment of climate change in the southwestern United States published in 2013. Greg Garfin was one of the members of this study, and several talks here in Green Valley, you might have heard it. There's a national climate assessment that NASA does, and this was part of that. They said, and of course it's climate change, so they're concerned about carbon emissions. If we continue emitting carbon the way we are emitting it, carbon dioxide and methane in particular, we will see the planet continue, and especially the South. We'll see longer and hotter heat waves. It won't necessarily get warmer in the wintertime. It'll just overall be warmer, but we could still have a Texas like they had a year ago, where it was bitterly cold. We could have that. Snowpack is going to continue to decrease and melt earlier in the year. That means that communities that rely on that late season melt for their water supply are going to be impacted. But here's the one that relates to droughts. Droughts are going to be hotter, more severe, more frequent, resulting in water deficits. They say in the last 110 years, that's the data they had. We know from tree rings that we're pretty serious deficits. There was another study that came out in 2020. This is the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, and they're calling what we're going through right now a mega drought. And they're saying it's as bad or worse than even that one in the 1200s. And there is a fingerprint, climate's got a fingerprint on it. Well, one of the things that happened in 2019, well, it actually happened a little bit earlier, but reinforced in 2019, there was a drought contingency plan. We'll call it the DCP. All along, Lake Powell has been the storage area for the upper basin states. Kind of like if you don't spend all your money, you put it in savings for a rainy day. Well, we're obviously at the opposite of a rainy day. But even though they've not completely drained, but released a significant amount of water from several different reservoirs, right now the Lake Powell is only at about 26% capacity. The reason they've added Reservoir Lake to this is because Lake Powell is also, the Glen Canyon Dam is also a hydroelectric power plant. And the Bureau of Reclamation thinks that you risk damage to the whole power plant thing once it gets to a certain level. So one of the things that we know is this is the last 5 years of water levels, and down here is where we're seeing the lake right now. There is concern about that hydroelectric plant and the storage anyway. You might be seeing Drain Lake Powell things in your news feed, but it is their storage. So I don't know. That's been happening since Monkey Wrench Gang back when I was a kid and still lived there. So Lake Mead is the lower basin states storage bank. It was at 34%. Here's the levels for the last 2 years, and we can see the blue down here. That's where it is today. So we are looking at some critical storage, critical low points in our storage. Now, we said business as usual emissions. There's been modeling of what happens if we continue these long, hot droughts. One of the worst things is that our soil moisture is seriously depleted. And now this is a model. This is at the point it gets to by the end of the century. But you can see that our state and the whole Four Corners states, all the Colorado River Basin states, as well as Mexico and Central America, a lot of Texas, and even, some oddball places you wouldn't expect, California, they're all in deep trouble because of heat and drought. Okay, so we know we've got a shortage. How's that shortage going to work? You've heard that there have been cuts made. Well, this DCP ratified in 2019, put 3 different tiers for shortages. So started when they were talking, it was at 1090. They said, okay, when the water in Lake Mead reaches 1075, we are going to make the first cuts. We're at 1067 now. They had to make the cuts. So the first set of cuts have been made. I've got another slide that kind of shows you a little bit more about that. And then every 25 feet, there are other big cuts. Tier 2A is here. Tier 3 is here. There's another little one I'll show you that only matters to California at 1045. And here is how the cuts actually go through. Nevada doesn't get much water, and so none of their cuts there, the blue, are very big at all. California gets more water, but not as much as Arizona, so their cuts aren't as big. Arizona takes some very steep cuts, as you can see. So we're, once we get to tier 2B, we don't take another one until tier 3, but good grief. That's still going to be an amount. And that may not be the final story and what those cuts amount to, as we will see. But who gets cut when you have a big cut like this? Well, cap waters used by 5 different entities, or baskets, if you will. Municipal and industrial and tribal is more than half of CAP water. These entities do not really get cut. We don't cut our contributions to Lake Mead because the lower Lake Mead drops, the more our cuts are. So this much, which is a big chunk of CAP water, does not get cut until well down the line. Other excess, well, you see the word excess and you already know that's gone. And that was the first place they cut. So there's no other excess left to cut. And so everything else is coming out of this agricultural settlement pool. Here it is over here, reduced by 100, this excess, and the agricultural settlement pool is reduced by 65%. If you live in Pinell County and you're a farmer, you are having to look at some other way to make a living. Those were the farms that got really severely cut by these big cuts. Well, going back into another research paper, because remember I said that the cuts that we saw on that bar that had the orange bars for Arizona and the gold bars for California, that may not be the end of the story. This was a paper that came out in the Center for Colorado River Studies a year ago this month, and they're describing lower river basin states, including Arizona, may have to cut what they think they're getting from the river by up to 40% in the next 20 years, 30 years, in order to keep reservoirs from falling too low. So that should cause us a little bit of a gulp. They're saying that it would be about twice as much when we have those cuts as we expected. So imagine those bar graphs being about twice as high. This is for Arizona, California, and Nevada. It wasn't much to begin with. So that is a big deal. Tony Davis, we talked about him a little bit earlier as a reporter who's pretty much on this beat. He's talking about 4 different states that also get Colorado River water. They're saying keeps too much for Arizona. And you say, well, you know, we've got a plan. We've signed this document. We've all agreed to these in 2019, what people were going to get. The bad news is that document is interim and it runs out in 2026. So by 2027, we may see a modified document that is pretty hard on our state. So that's the first of our challenges. We've got a threatened CAP allocation. We've over allocated it to begin with. We're dealing with a mega drought. Other states are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, Arizona's getting a big chunk of this. And then, of course, climate change underlies all of that. So as we talk about the other challenges to our water in Arizona, just keep this whole thing in mind, because this is a fundamental problem. Okay, but a little bit of good news. When you hear happy talk, when you go to the water company's website and it says, oh, no problem, Arizona's got the best laws in the world. I mean, it's big happy talk. What they're talking about is an 1980 water law under Governor Bruce Babbitt that established what are called active management areas. Phoenix, Pinell County, Tucson, Santa Cruz County, oddly, because we don't get CAP water. And then and Prescott. And then there are a couple of other little oddball places here that are called INAs. It stands for Irrigation Non-Expansion Areas. And we're not going to talk too much about those. It'll be really hard to add any new ones of those. But it basically means you can't go in and add new agriculture in those tiny little areas. Glad we've got them anyway. So the whole point is they want to, back in 1980, they wanted to have a safe yield. In other words, they want the groundwater inputs to kind of be equal to the outputs by 2025. Spoiler alert, we're not going to make it, but they have done that. That law really did change things. Some features of it, they slowed groundwater use. One of the ways they did it was they said, okay, a lot of people moving into the state, we need to make homes for them, but wherever you make a home for them, you need to prove that you're not going to exhaust the groundwater under them in 100 years. And the only way you can do that is to have some sort of recharge or to take all your water from the surface. Now, this is store unused water in Lakes Mead and Lakes Powell. Reuse water, we saw that 2% that Arizona uses. Things like the Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station is being cooled. It requires a huge amount of water for cooling. They can do that with reused water. Really brilliant. getting people to conserve water. They've done block rate water pricing. That means your first block is pretty inexpensive, but boy, does it go up in blocks after that. Encourage rainwater harvesting. That helps cities in particular take some of that stuff that would have been flooding in the streets and put it into basins that then percolate back into the groundwater. It's a win-win situation because it helps with the stormwater drainage problem. They had people rip out lawns, gave them, use water efficient irrigation and appliances. One of the big things they had to do was tribal nations were left out of that 1920 water compact, and they had rights. They were certainly here first. And so all of that was settled in 1980. That was a good thing. It needed to be done. And it worked. We can see that in 1957, we've got water use about here, and that was kind of moving up with population growth. But from 1970 to 1980, there must have been a big bunch of farms going or something, because holy smokes, population growth was not the same trajectory as our water use. Well, the 1980s law goes in, and you can see that water use has gone way down, even though the population is continuing to improve. But this graph comes from Arizona Department of Water Resources, and this is the kind of happy talk that I want you to be aware of. I can't find this written anywhere, but just everything I've seen from Arizona Department of Water Resources is when they say Arizona's water management success, they're not talking about Arizona. What they're talking about are the active management areas. They are ignoring the rest of the state. And that brings us to this slide. This was, Tony Davis again, Arizona's water system for suburban growth. Babbitt says it. That was Bruce Babbitt, who went on to become Secretary of the Interior. What the heck is he talking about? Arizona's going to struggle to find water for suburban growth. What? And I wouldn't have been nearly as worried about it, but good grief. They mentioned Quail Creek by name and had a map of the town in the online article that I read. And so it's like, holy smokes, I better get to the bottom of this. Well, when I started looking, it turns out there was a law in 1993. Now, there was shenanigans. This was pushed by developers who didn't like that 100-year water supply thing. And so they got the legislature to pass a Central Arizona groundwater replenishment. Replenishment is key. They're adding something to the groundwater district. Initials are CAGRD, and I'm going to call it KGARD. Okay, now this is when certificates of assured water come in. That has to do with that 100-year supply. And what the KGARD law does is it says, okay, here you are in Sahuarita. You don't have access to Central Arizona Project water, but you could find somebody that's got access to it. You've got a development right here in between Tucson and Green Valley. They need groundwater in order for you to be able to service all these homes. So what we can do is, I'm going to show you a map of it in a minute. The end of the Central Arizona Project Canal is way up north. It's about Pima Mine Road. So we're going to let you buy water from the CAP project, however you can, and then they can recharge it clear up here if that's where they decide to do it, while you pump it down there. What could possibly go wrong? Now, there is money changes hands, and so you're a little bit reliant on what they charge you up here for whatever water district you're buying from. But that's basically the 1993 law that had Babbitt and others so concerned about. So here's the Central Arizona Project Canal. It ends here at Pima Mine Road. Here's Sahuarita, here's Green. And actually, there's been some good things done on that in Green Valley. So the Community Water Company of Green Valley went together with Rosemont Mine to pay for it, because this was pretty expensive. And they went together with FICO, that's the pecan orchards, who had joined with Freeport. So we got 4 different entities, 2 of the mines here. They paid for these two big pipelines to go down from the CAP canal to get it down much closer to Green Valley in the main part of Sahuarita. Now, the Rosemont just got approval. This was just January 8th. To store CAP water. What they want to do is recharge. So Rosemont up here and really the community water company, they want to do recharge basins. FICO's got irrigation too, and the Freeport wants to do irrigation basins. But the city objected, but they had pull in another way. So it happened. Could be good. Sahuarita, Quail Creek use groundwater that's now being recharged elsewhere by CAP water. These groundwater recharge basins are good places for wildlife. This could be a good thing, except until we find out a little bit more information. Isn't that always the way? So this is a really nice little study done in 2019, or came out in 2019. This is an ASU, the Kyle Center for Water Policy at the Morrison Institute. And the title of it is The Elusive Concept of an Assured Water Supply, those 100-year things, the role of K-Guard and replenishment. Their most important finding was that enrollment in K-Guard has grown far beyond expectations. They can't turn anybody away, for one thing. And that enrollment has radically outpaced any excess CAP water. So now it's going to be hard for K-Guard communities, of which Quail Creek was notably one, to find water for replenishment. We're not too surprised by that because of this study. Remember, we talked about that a couple slides back. Near doubling, one of their findings was they expect the population to nearly double by 2050. And that is, of course, means that there's a lot more people trying to use limited water supplies. So looked up on the census, how are we doing in terms of growth this year? Well, I could only look at last year. Idaho leads the way, Utah and Montana at 1.7, but Arizona comes in at the third spot at 1.4. So yes, we are indeed growing. There are not enough water supplies for replenishment. This is going to be a problem. Other part of the reason is that there are other entities, for example, the tribal may not have been using all of their allotments. So they're, in the hot drought, they're needing more. So they have these long-term CAP contracts and they're starting to use more and more of their rights. We talked about the excess is just gone already. New renewable supplies, from rivers, from other sources, they're just hard to find because it pretty much means it has to be surface water. And then, of course, we've just talked about the cuts to the CAP allocations. That's going to affect it. Pumping water from great depths is a problem. The water is not the same all the way down. It tends to fill up with kind of some nasty minerals as you get further down. Of course, it's more expensive to pump. And of course, how can you, of course, the disconnect between where you pump the water and where they recharge it could be a problem, although we have to give credit to FICO and the Community Water Company, Green Valley, for at least getting it closer in here. Groundwater depletion is continuing to be exacerbated. And this is the interesting one I'm going to talk about here. K-Guard members, homeowners pay an open tab. You have to go, if you're in a K-Guard community, you don't really know how much your water bill is going to be until a contract is signed and then carried out. And they were very concerned about this too. K-Guard's financial model is a potential financial catastrophe because you have to pay for it. For example, Phoenix assessment rate has swelled from $154 per acre foot. That's about enough for a family of 4, to $727 per acre foot. And the expectation is that it is going to go even higher. This was a year ago. Wall Street eyes billions in the Colorado's water. What they want to do is amplify futures markets and millisecond trading to precipitously raise the price of water in cities or those housing developments. They don't care about agriculture. In fact, they're happy to pay farmers not to farm because farmers will not pay the high prices that you and I are going to pay in order to keep water coming out of our taps. Now, they love it that, or they're planning to exploit the volatility that the drought has brought us. They're also talking about failing infrastructure, government restrictions, but the intent is to raise the price of water. So suddenly, this recharge by CAP water, which we know is going to be cut possibly because those double cuts by 2026 may mean there's less CAP water. Suddenly this begins to look like it's on not quite firm ground. So we have threatened CAP allocation, but we've also got threats to our groundwater supplies. Our population's getting bigger. We don't have strong laws to protect us. That 93 water law is not very good. And it leaves a bunch of communities under the K-Guard system vulnerable to people who just want to make money. Well, when I was looking into this to begin with, one of the things that I kept thinking was, you know, these AMAs and INAs, they're not very, this isn't a very big part of Arizona. It is the big cities, it's Tucson and Phoenix, but the rest of Arizona, what's going on? I know there's wells in the rest of Arizona. So I just Googled wells in Arizona and came up with this registry of wells, and holy smokes, look how many wells there are in Arizona. So there is certainly a lot of water being pulled out that are not governed by the AMA water, the 1980s water law. So I just started looking to see what I was going to find in some of these non-AMA areas, and fascinating. We're going to just quickly look at three areas: La Paz, Mojave County, and Cochise County down in southeastern Arizona. La Paz County looks like this, unless you pump a lot of groundwater, in which case it looks like this. Well, Al-Marai, the largest dairy farm in Saudi Arabia, moved here in 2014. They purchased about almost 10,000 acres of farmland because they don't want to use their precious groundwater supplies to grow alfalfa. It's so water use intensive. And they've got so many dairy cows. And so they come to Arizona where they don't have to pay for water, and they use ours 12 months out of the year. Nice little video on YouTube 2019. Camels don't fly, deserts don't bloom. It was just kind of fun. I recommend it. The problem with that kind of extensive and 12 months out of the year groundwater use, and these big industrial agriculture, if you're going to do 10,000 acres of farming, that's industrial agriculture, they can afford to go way deep in an aquifer. And they begin to draw the water level down, which was probably up here somewhere when they started. They draw that water level down, and existing wells, and a well is expensive to drill, existing wells are just tough out of luck. They have to cough up couple $100,000, $300,000 to go deeper, or they have to, either abandon their house or haul water. So I've hauled water. I know what that's like. It's not pretty. There's another piece of this, and that is, as the water is gone from this aquifer, which is like the best aquifers, like these gravel beds, there's nothing really, the water no longer is holding up the surface. So you can start to see things just kind of settling down and compacting. And that means that recharge, this aquifer cannot be readily recharged in the future. So it's a double whammy. They're taking it now and they're losing the future. The other big piece is something called subsidence. And subsidence is when, when the aquifer drops and you compacts, one side may not drop because it wasn't gravel and the other side was, the aquifer was gravel, it drops. There's a big section between Tucson and Phoenix. If you know where to look, you can see this in Pinal County. There's a big area that's really prone to it in La Paz County. Unfortunately, some of it's right under the Central Arizona Project Canal. And interestingly enough, according to the Department of Water Resources, you all in Green Valley have got a big area, Helmet Peak Road, Sarita Road, Pima Mine Road. This is a big area that's prone to subsidence and aquifer compaction. Well, how can they get away with some of this stuff? The thing we have to remember is that in large parts of Arizona, not the AMAs, but the rest of it, groundwater law is governed by the doctrine of reasonable use, but there's no definition for reasonable use. Everybody just takes exactly what they want as much as they can before it's gone. You know how that works. I liked this little quote. Arizona is one of the only places in the Southwest right now where you can't manage rural groundwater because the state doesn't have or enable, they don't have or won't create tools that manage how we use it. Now that came from this, oh, mine's covered up by, how am I going to get rid of that? Covered up by I can't see the, oh, there it is. Business for Water Stewardship. And I'll mention them again because they're part of a group that is working together in Arizona to help us have better laws. I'm going to recommend them. We'll just end here. Okay, so moving north now. Now we're up in Mojave County, and we're seeing the same thing going on here. Lax regulations, industrial agriculture, residents leaving other people who already live there with no water at all. Sorry, I'm having trouble with maybe I can get rid of it that way. Oh, there we go. Here's another one. This is from Western Water. Lax regulations, but they've called out something that's really important. Companies largely operate in secret and most refuse to disclose their plans or the amount of water that they are using to the county. It's a big secret and it's very difficult to manage water when you don't know how much is being taken out of the aquifers every year. There we go. Just a little aside, don't have to do this slide, but I think it's kind of interesting. So the way it got started in Mojave County was in 2002. There was a real estate developer who was able to buy 100,000 acres. He thought he was going to make a killing putting in subdivisions, but then 2007 and 8 and the economic meltdown happened. And so he ended up turning them into alfalfa farms, large alfalfa farms. He knew he could sell that. And sure enough, we've now got a United Arab Emirates based conglomerate in there. They are, if you look them up, they're a #1 exporter of feed and forage products to markets in Japan, China, South Korea, and the Middle East. Our free water is feeding cows in Asia. I got nothing against Asia, and I got nothing against feeding cows in particular, but it just does seem that we're giving them all the water for free, so they're not doing this growing in some place that's got decent water. Nut growers, we're going to see that a couple of times. Some California nut growers have come in because it's easier here. And then this one's just cute. We've already talked about why hedge funds are buying up water rights. This was written before that all became, their plan became known, and that's East Coast hedge fund investors have purchased land in the area for agricultural purposes. That's just cute. So Mojave County is the most Republican county. Republicans in general tend to prefer to write their own legislation for their own area, not have the government to step in. But it was getting so bad that they asked the state to help safeguard the declining groundwater, but the state couldn't do anything. The hands were tied. State law forbids them from considering doing any kind of planning, or even for the state to do planning, because they can't even consider what might happen tomorrow, or what the plans are. They can't look down the road and see where this is getting us. And they can't put in a new irrigation non-expansion area, because if a well was already there, they can't limit its pumping. So that, and Mojave County is just really struggling to deal with this. We're moving now down to Cochise County. This was from screenshots from a Channel 4 news thing. This was several years ago, and this shows dry wells since 2008 in that area. That number is up to 100, according to something I found just last year. They've kind of comparing the water usage versus natural recharge. And you can see that we are not getting natural recharge anywhere close to the amount of water being used. And here's what happened. Back in 2015, a company out of Minnesota called Riverview, I understand it's a dairy, they purchased land. They drilled 80 new wells. Most are 1,000 feet deep, many close to 2,400 feet deep. They will be the last industrial agricultural group standing when the water is completely gone from Cochise County. They've already dried up wells around 100. And the article is saying the same thing. Freewheeling political climate. California's nut growers moving in here. In Arizona, no regulations exist as to how much water farmers can pump in rural areas. We're seeing land subsidence there. This wellhead was on the ground. The land has just dropped below it. So, what can you do about it? I have a little article. Sharon Megdal, who's the director of the Water Resources Research Center in U of A, says, it's completely legal. There's really nothing you can do about it. Now, she reminds us that there are people who don't want to see water regulated. So her advice is to advocate instead of I totally disagree with this, but she says, instead of advocating for state law to change, more people should focus on what they can control, their own consumption. Well, that could work in Tucson. 75% of the water from this, is single family, multifamily. So conservation actually could help here. But when you come down here and look at the Bureau of Reclamation study of Green Valley's water demand and supply, that's not going to be so useful. This is your single family, multifamily, and commercial, probably commercial in here, and the golf courses. So that's, conserving here isn't going to make a hill of beans. 2/3 of your water is coming from mining and from agriculture of your demand. Now, if you go over here to your supply, 1/4 of your supply is coming from CAP water, and another little section is coming from renewable groundwater. That means you're probably also getting everything else from groundwater. But if you look at what's really available, treated, the rest of what they're going to use if they don't use mined groundwater is kind of ugly. Treated effluent, impaired water, a piece they can't even figure out yet. Conservation, I don't know how they're going to figure that one out unless they can get the farms to use less, or the mines. And water management, which is kind of in there, which it doesn't look real good for use and demand in Green Valley. I grew up in Arizona. As a kid, I learned that the 5 C's of Arizona's economy are citrus, cattle, cotton, climate, and copper. Copper meaning any kind of mining at all. So now we're going to make a little bit of a shift to another threat. And we kind of seen it in that last graph where so much mining was such a drain on the water. So the law that governs mining on public lands, like Forest Service lands, and Arizona's got a huge amount of public lands, was passed in 1872. That is the law that still governs it. Now, just an aside here, 1872 was the year the combustion engine was invented. So they passed a law with the idea of guys out there with their mule and a pick, which is not the way mining has been done for a while. $100 billion worth of minerals have been removed from public lands, and the public has gotten $0 of royalties for the United States. So that in itself is a problem, but that's not the only problem. You're probably more familiar with Rosemont. I'd like to call your attention to some mines that are going in the Patagonia Mountains. The Patagonia Mountains is part of the Santa Cruz River watershed. That's my watershed in Rio Rico. That's your watershed in Green Valley. Our groundwater flows north in that watershed. So what happens in the Patagonia Mountains matters to all of us in the long run. Maybe, well, so there is an Australian company that owns South 32 Hermosa mine, and they've got a problem. We've got healthy groundwater levels in Santa Cruz County, and it's a problem to them because their minerals are below our groundwater. So they plan to de-water is their term for it. And the way they'll do it is 1.6 billion gallons per year to just be pumped out of the groundwater aquifer, put on the ground to do whatever it's going to do. They're going to do that for 4 years. That's 6.4 billion gallons of water to just be removed from the groundwater. That will immediately produce a cone of, kind of dry land where they can mine. And then eventually that will all level out, and our groundwater across the watershed will drop. There's a problem when our watersheds drop. So this was a Audubon. Healthy groundwater levels support rivers and nearby habitat, wide diversity of the vegetation that grows along the river. You come to Tubac in particular, we've got some really pretty walks along the river with all that different vegetation. It supports healthy bird life. It supports healthy wildlife. Ecotourism is really important in Santa Cruz County. It supports a little bit of surface water. As groundwater levels decline, what we start seeing happening is that, not all the trees their roots can't reach down to the lower level, and you get invasive species like salt cedar moving in. When that happens, the habitat is not as good. You find birds and other wildlife are now in decline because they're impacted. As it continues to decline, you get what it looks like between Tubac and Green Valley, the Santa Cruz River. There's not even any trees that live along the edge of it. Any trees that might still live there are going to be these invasive species. And now you start losing your bird populations and any wildlife. This is serious, especially since all these mountain ranges around us are known as Sky Islands, and they're part of the Madrian Highlands of Mexico, which is a key global biodiversity region. We've got the Santa Cruz River here, but in the next valley over is the San Pedro River. There are big sections of it, even better than the Santa Cruz River, that are perennial, and that provides really necessary water for animals migrating. They go from one sky island to another. That's an important part of the health of a lot of the species that live in these sky islands. So we're going to talk about threats to this surface water from both Sierra Vista and Bend's housing developments. Well, we lost this one. This was down in Sierra Vista. It was supposed to be about 7,000. It is 7,000 homes. It was disputed because they had to use exclusively groundwater. But Arizona sides with the developer and allowed that that big housing development to go through. Push to cut rules along the San Pedro River. Bowers and Griffin are the key legislators who are pushed and succeeded. They're both very effective politicians. Now, Rusty Bowers is always the chairman of the Energy, Environment, Natural Resources. I think he had to take another even more important job he's in the Senate at the moment. They trade places. Like D'Alessandro, if you're timed out in the Senate, then you move to the House and vice versa. A lot of legislators do that. But these two are always the chair people, or they choose someone. In this case, now he's chosen somebody to cover for him, but he chose somebody who he knew would do what was needed. Now, Gail Griffin is going to be your year now in the new legislative district 19. She will be, or is, your current representative to the Arizona State House. Oh, sorry. And because she is the chairman of this department, she can decide what water bills are brought to the floor for consideration. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And I'm sorry, I'm going as fast as I can here, but just a couple more things. So the one in Benson is 28,000 homes. It's called Vigneto. Vigneto means vineyard in Italian. Now, Tuscany has a lot of vineyards. The advertising is all about Tuscany. Well, Tuscany gets 35 inches of rain a year compared to Benson's 14. This is Benson. This is Tuscany. If you're going to do Tuscany, you're going to be pumping a lot of groundwater. And we talked about the beautiful San Pedro River, the biodiversity. These jaguars, 90 mammal species thrive here. That would devastate them. One more quick study, again from the Kyle Center for Water Policy. This is the myth of safe yield. Our groundwater, according to them, is in deep trouble. Conservation is not going to take it. There are too many people who are allowed to pump groundwater in perpetuity. These are grandfathered in. Land subsidence, water quality degradation, aquifer compaction as we continue to pump groundwater. The 1993 legislation since 1980, they're cute there, created additional challenges. So it's these lax, out-of-date water laws outside in the rest of Arizona. That's another one of our challenges. So what do we do with it? This is my favorite kind of climate change graphic to talk about. Where do we go from here? And a couple things. I don't talk too much about resilience. That's I'm kind of more the science end of things, but this is like more of a people thing. How do we help people cope? But adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation is how are we going to live with the changes that come? And the number one thing I hope you walk away from is we need to strengthen Arizona's water law. And the other one, mitigation. The best way I've seen it is 2030, we have the easy stuff. We've reduced carbon emissions by 50% with all the easy stuff. By 2040, we take another bite, another 50% of what's left. And that leaves between 2040 and 2050, all the hardest pieces like making steel, which is hard to do with solar power at the moment. But that gives us some time for the new technology. So what are some of the water laws? I just want to show you how effective Gail Griffin is at getting laws passed and what this means for us. I'm not going to go into detail just for time, but we're going to look at 4 bills. I followed these not knowing this at the beginning of last year when all these bills started. I was just following a bunch of water bills. So here's one that she introduced that I didn't like. Governor signed it in May. Another one I didn't like, the governor signed in February. This one was signed in April. Another one was signed in March. These are all her bills. But then when you go back and you look at the ones I did like, here's what I saw on a regular basis. They never got out of committee. They were never voted on. I do want to talk a little bit about this. Victoria Steele is running, the last I heard she was running to replace Kirkpatrick, so name to remember, but she would like to see that that everybody that owns a well reports the amount of water they withdraw. That seems like a good idea. And the quantity of groundwater used that they're using during the calendar year. That seems really sensible. This projected rates of withdrawal. This is an Atondo. Atondo is another person who writes good water law. This has to do with irrigation non-expansion areas, but it allows them to better plan by projecting what's happening. And Tonda wanted to extend this adequate water supply requirement statewide. D'Alessandro, who's been ours, has a good kind of a holistic thing about watershed health. It's another one, never made it to a vote. I did look up just a couple of months ago. I thought, what the heck is ADWR doing about this? They're just all this happy talk. What are they doing about these non-AMA groundwater? And they really didn't deal with it until about June 2019. And then this was like the first thing I could find, because it seems like that was chairman had recommended council form a groundwater committee. It seems a little late to be doing that, but the chairman got the council's consensus, and look who's going to be the chairperson. Oh my God, Gail Griffin is going to talk about the fox in charge of the hen house. Also Jamie Kelly, who's general counsel for the Mojave Water. She's a lawyer. One last study. This is Audubon, and this is important because it's not just our future. Arizona's surface water is a big part of our economy. They looked at the economic impact of this surface water, and they found that water-based outdoor recreation ranks above mining and golf in terms of local input to the state. And you can see some big numbers on 114,000 jobs. So this is not just our future, this is also current. So what do? If you work into I like this graphic because it kind of reminds us if we're signing an occasional petition, even just voting, it's not enough. We will not make a difference in what's happening in Arizona. My advice is to support with your time and your money some of the groups that are working to change the laws. And here are some of the ones that seem to be doing very effective work. Sierra Club, obviously the Audubon Society, should have them up here. This Water for Arizona, we talked about the Business for Water Stewardship, but this is Environmental Defense Fund, Western Resource Advocate. Here's where Audubon is. This is actually, Audubon is doing good stuff, but they're doing a lot of it through this Water for Arizona Coalition. The two mining groups, Patagonia Area Resource Alliance, working a little bit more down in Santa Cruz County, and Save the Scenic Santa Ritas. So I know that was long. Thank you for sticking with me. But let's see if we've got some questions here.
Connie,
Yes.
we have a lot of comments actually.
Sorry that went over. I thought I could get it done.
No, it's marvelous. Although one of the responses I think sums up what most of us probably feel. This is one of the best, most enlightening, most disgusting presentations we have ever had. Many thanks. I think we feel so helpless, and so it's important. This is I don't know, probably the third time I've seen your presentation, and it makes one so angry, but that there's this nonchalance about it that exists.
And so much happy talk.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Talk about it, and you think we're all the model for the world.
May I remind everyone, because that was a question that came up for folks who want to view this presentation later, that our presentations are always recorded and will be posted to the YouTube site as soon as there's editing, that whatever editing needs to be done. So thank you very much for the comments. I don't see anything else except that we have a question from
Liz Adams.
Liz Adams. Okay. No.
Oh, okay.
No question. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well, actually, I had one question for Connie. There's been a lot of talk about desalination of water or building pipelines to other states to draw water. Can you just briefly comment on those options?
One of the bills that I went by, because I was already so late, that Gail Griffin has to do with resurrecting a desalinization plant in Yuma. And the Sierra Club has opposed that, but there certainly is a lot of talk of desalinization now. My understanding of desalinization is that it's a very expensive way to get water. For one thing, we would have to desalinize it. One of the ideas I've heard talk about is desalinize it on the coast and let California use that water and give us more of the CAP water. So what does that mean? Does California get those big expensive prices, or do we share the price for the desalinization? Another thing I've heard people ask about is, well, why can't we just pipe it from places in the US where they've got too much water? But good grief, imagine how expensive that's going to be. And remember that slide right at the beginning where most of the US is in fact at some level of drought right now. When they do get water, it comes as a big runoff event. It's not like they have huge rivers and lakes, and most people don't want to give up their rivers and lakes. You know, they just have runoff, which we don't want to spend a lot of money. So yeah, it could happen. I hope we don't get to that. Being responsible with our groundwater is a way better plan.
There also was a question from Miriam Burt, who was able to join us a little bit later, and she wondered whether or not there was any comment about the pecan groves in Sarita or Green Valley. Are they here to stay, although we've read maybe differently?
Yeah, what the pecan groves are telling us is that they plan to phase out the pecans and put in houses. And that actually could be a good thing. Pecans use quite a bit of water. You can design housing development so that it is, you know, and Quail Creek, a lot of Green Valley has got some awesome communities that are landscaped in a way that you don't have to water. But they're here right now, and you saw the graph about how much agricultural water they use. They do have a CAP allocation, so they are using some CAP water. No, it's not all groundwater, in other words.
No. I think that's all the comments that we have. So I just would like to thank you yet again for bringing this to us and providing some avenues where we can have some kind of input, at least if we can't remove legislators who seem to be perpetual in their ignorance. Yes, thank you very much.
Friends about it. I mean, spread the word, because a lot of people, it's all out there, it's all available, but you know, unless you got a clue to look, it's hard to know. Well, this has been a joy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Connie. And now we'll turn it over to Susan.
Okay. Here I am. Go.
You're good to go, Susan.
Well, that's probably true. However, something's happened to my screen, so I don't know what's going on here. Hang on just a moment.
We can hear
we
you.
go. Okay. It said, yeah, the Zoom meeting was locked, it said so. All right. Oh, it doesn't sync very well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And you can see me. I may not connect, but if you need to look away, if that becomes irritating, I certainly understand. Welcome to the February general meeting, everyone. We'll begin by remembering our mission statement. We are to advance gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. At this point, I'd like to pay a bit of tribute to Dorothy McKenna. Most of you realize that she passed away on February 3rd. And today would be her 95th birthday, which her family has decided to go ahead and celebrate. Dorothy was raised on a farm in the plains, on the plains of Illinois, near Chenoweth, Illinois. And as a child during the Great Depression, she had her horse named Trixie that took her to a one-room schoolhouse. And education helped her realize her natural gifts, tireless energy for reading, learning, and wanting to help others. During World War II, with the nationwide shortage of nurses, an opportunity arose with the nurse cadets of Michael Reese Hospital Center in Chicago. And while caring for wounded soldiers at the Maywood Veteran Center, she came to see a vision for herself, and that was to enter into a career of nursing. She, after earning her degree, she moved to California, where she was offered a surgical nursing instructor position in Sacramento. Dorothy met her husband, William, on a Sierra Club trip. The couple was married in Illinois before they set out for the East Coast. Dorothy worked at Boston Mass General, and William focused on his studies at the Harvard Business School. Later, relocating to the Midwest, they became a Ford Motor Company family, as is described, living in Dearborn, Michigan. She effected change as president of the Dearborn branch of AAUW, president of the Dearborn Community Health Council, and she campaigned for decades for the congressional passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, which was one of the causes dearest to her heart. She was the founder of the Rape Crisis Services for the Dearborn Police Department and chairwoman of the Anti-Assault Coalition in Dearborn, committee chair for Focus on Women and the Alternative Action Committee. Excuse me. The more she learned of the injustices towards women, the more she wanted to be involved. Activism came naturally. As a devoted feminist, Dorothy fought for gender equity for half a century and attended many rallies all over the US, and the list of her contributions goes on with too many to name. And we know her contributions she made to us, which were wonderful. Dorothy was a prolific writer. She kept a journal most of her life. She played the piano and sang, which was another joy to her. Life in Green Valley led Dorothy the ability to rekindle her love for singing and music. She was an active part of the Borderlines Universal Unitarian congregation, where she sang in the choir. Dorothy will be missed. She was unselfish to a fault. With her extended family, including anyone in need, Dorothy felt the pain in this world and did something about it. She recognized and embodied its beauty and loved to sing The Rose, dancing to Glenn Miller, and had a special place in her heart for seahorses. The world is now a shade darker for those who knew her, but so many have and will benefit from her unwavering warmth and light. Dorothy's family will plan a memorial in the spring in Illinois. Another celebration will be planned in Arizona for her Green Valley community here. Thank you very much. And before we move on, it is with sadness and pain that I report the passing of Sharon Rizek Anderson's recent passing. Her husband, Gary, passed away about 3 weeks ago, I believe. Sharon, I believe you're with us today.
I am, Susan. Thank you.
And may memories of a lifetime together and the legacy of your children and grandchildren bring you comfort, Sharon.
Thank you, Susan.
You're very welcome.
I want to say to all of you that to get through this time has been so helpful because of the letters, the phone calls, and all you've provided to me personally. And Gary knew some of that even before he passed away. I want to say also that he had a death like most of us would want, peacefully, and he knew us up to the last 5 minutes of his death. And he was only ill from cancer from after Christmas to now. So I feel blessed to have had 58 years of marriage and 60 years of loving the most loving man I've ever known in my life. And I want to walk in his shoes for the rest of my life. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I will put a thank you also in the newsletter. I also wanted to say that I do want to do International Women's Day on Sunday, March 6th. And I'll be contacting some of you if you'll be the voice of women. I will write that as we did last year. It works on Zoom. But this year the theme is even on equity. So it's so aligned with what we are as AAUW. So I just want to do that. Writing is my therapy right now. So to do that is going to be helpful for me if all of you will join in with me, and maybe Kathy can send out a blast when we put some things together, and we'll have one practice for that. And then I am going to do my Exploring Women's Culture, because as all of us know, March is women's, I call it Herstory Month, and we want to hear her story that hasn't been in the history of women's lives. So again, I thank all of you for all you've done for me, and I'm going to be strong because that's what Gary expects me to be. And our children have all been here. They've gone now, but they're coming back. Taurus, where Gary worked, is doing a special celebration of his journey there on March 13th, but they're sponsoring it for the staff. So I decided, and I said this to Kathy, when we feel comfortable getting together in person and the weather is appropriate, I'm going to have a gathering for AAUW women and on my patio to make it more personal and more about Gary's life with me, if you all feel comfortable doing that. But we'll wait and see what the COVID ratings are in the future, and then we'll go from there. But again, thank you, everyone. I feel I have 100 sisters out there that have certainly been part of my life for it's 2 weeks yesterday that Gary left us. And we will have in Park Rapids, Minnesota, where he and I had our first date on the 4th of July. We do have a memorial service. It's really a celebration of Gary's journey. His body is there in Park Rapids now. Our son is going over there to see him in just a little while. So we've done everything that Gary's last wishes were. So we will have July. It's the Friday before the 4th of July. We will have a celebration of Gary's journey there in Park Rapids, and then his burial will be in the cemetery where my parents are buried, and where we'd had our first date, and where we left Park Rapids to move to Green Valley. So thank you for this time, and thank you so very much for all your kindness.
Thank you, Sharon, and our thoughts of peace and healing are with you. Thank you, dear.
I feel that.
Okay, now we need to talk a little bit about our purpose here in terms of encouraging women and girls. So I turn the meeting to Susan Kirk, and followed by, I guess, joined by Phyllis and Karen, who will give us a LunaFest raffle quilt raffle update.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So our planning team for Luna Fest has been hard at work in all the aspects. We've had, it seems like each year Luna Fest grows in what we do. And of course, some of it is because of COVID. We've had to be on Zoom, have it on Zoom, so, or online. And Phyllis has taken over that aspect, which has turned out to be a very, very big job. And she'll talk about that in a minute, but I just wanted to thank everybody who's been on the planning team. People have worked hard, Jerry Peterson on publicity, Susan Peterson running around town, sticking up posters and signs about Luna Fest. I don't know whether anybody has seen them in the shops around. Karen Lewick and Pat Young working on the upcoming raffle. Sharon Lyons and Libby have been on the radio. Did anybody hear them on the radio? Put your hand up if you heard them on the radio. Okay, good. I was selling quilt raffle tickets and had it on there. And Kathy, of course, with the blasts. And you'll see Kathy as the MC for Luna Fest when you watch it online. Has everybody gotten their Luna Fest tickets? Let me see a show of hands. Who's already gotten their tickets? Yahoo. Okay, great. If not, they're available up until Saturday, which is when, of course, it's going to happen. So, well, let me just say a couple of words about the quilt raffle, and then Karen and Phyllis can talk about the other aspects. The quilt raffle is going very well. So far, we've earned, I guess it's earned, $1,345. There'll be one more chance to buy raffle tickets, and that'll be this Thursday. It was supposed to be tomorrow, but because of the dire weather forecast, and Yahoo for getting water after hearing our talk from about the water problem, but at least we're going to get some rain in February, which I guess is kind of unusual. But we were going to be selling tickets at Desert Meadows Park, but the weather has changed that. And so we'll be doing it Thursday from 11 o'clock till 2 o'clock. And I'll talk to those who had volunteered for Wednesday. Don't worry about it. If you can't come, I can hang out for 3 hours on Thursday. So no problem with the quilt. So hopefully if you haven't already gotten your quilt raffle ticket, you can stop by then. If for some reason you can't, just give me a call and we'll figure out a way to get your quilt raffle tickets to you if you'd like them. Okay, Phyllis, you want to be next?
Sure. The Luna Fest tickets are still selling. Realize it's a little bit different this year than previous years. Once you have 48 hours beginning, I believe, 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 19th. You have 48 hours to watch the films, and you can watch them as often as you want over the next 48 hours once you start. So if you don't start until Sunday afternoon, you still have 48 hours to watch them. You can go to our website for tickets. If you don't get on the website, you could just go to lunafest.org, LUNAFEST.org, and you'll see that we're listed for screening the films on the 19th. The films themselves take up about 80 minutes altogether. I believe there are 7 films. One of them that I'm quite interested in is a young woman, I believe she's 15 years old, who noticed in the New Yorker magazine that there were no cartoons by women, and she set out to change that. There's another one about dog walking, another one about a woman who's a maid to white families. I believe she's Hispanic. Very, very interesting films. I think there are 2 that are animated this year. I believe there's a total of 7 films. So again, get your tickets. I'm personally getting a ticket for my daughter and my daughter-in-law so that afterwards we can get together and talk about the films and their impact and what they mean to us. So please get your tickets.
Okay, I'm going to jump in there. Is this good timing, Phyllis? Before Karen speaks, Sharon Lyons has already watched the films and she's created discussion questions. So we'll be sending those out through a blast. Kathy, I'll need to talk to you about that. Maybe this week, in a few days, within the next few days. We don't want to inundate everybody with blasts all at once. So we'll figure out sometime before the Saturday to get those discussion questions out if you'd like to download them, print them, or use them in whatever way you wish to. Okay, Karen. Karen, we can't hear you. Your mute is on, evidently.
Karen, you're muted.
Can you hear me better now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, there's still raffle tickets available, needless to say. And the generosity of our members just I can't say enough. And the hard work that Pat Young has put into making sure everything gets put in the right place so that the drawings are correct. She's just worked herself all over the place with this. So if you have not yet, fill out your raffle thing and you can drop it off at my house at 849 West Golf Course Place. And there's a box out there. I've received actually 3 orders today. And this morning, I think it might be a little late to mail them. So we want everybody to get an opportunity because there's such wonderful things that are being raffled off. So good luck, everybody, and we'll see you Saturday morning.
Okay, thank you, Karen. This is getting to be really exciting, I think. All right, I will now turn the space over to Henny, who has some news about the Swarita Food Bank need.
Hi, thank you, Susan. In the past, our branch has been very generous in providing diapers for the Sarita Food Bank. But we haven't done that since we haven't been meeting in person. I learned, however, that the food bank is now part of the regional diaper bank. So their diaper needs are pretty well being taken care of for now, but they do need desperately feminine hygiene products, tampons and sanitary napkins. As of a week ago, they had 1 box of tampons left on their shelves. So I am willing to collect these items. I have a box out on my front porch. If you would bring them by, Kathy will send out a blast with my address. Or if you prefer, give me a call or email me and I will pick them up from your home. And I've also had a few people who directly ordered these items from Amazon and had them delivered directly to my house. So that's an option too, especially if you're an Amazon Prime member, so it doesn't cost any shipping. Anyway, I know you'll be generous with this drive also, and the food bank will definitely appreciate it. So this will collect through the month of March. So that'll be our project from now till the end of March. Susan Schmuck has a question. You have a question, Susan? Go ahead.
I had to unmute myself. How long will you be collecting at your home?
How long? Through the end of March.
Through the end of March. Did you just say that and I didn't listen?
That's okay. Never hurts to repeat.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Henny. It's a very worthwhile project. Karen, I think you are next talking to us about national dues. No? You know, I thought that was curious.
It could be me. I don't know if it's me. Sorry.
Who's me? Who's talking?
I'm sorry, this is Jerry Peterson.
Jerry, it probably should be you. I'm looking at the agenda that Marie had created here, and I think she used the wrong name. Of course, it should be you, Jerry.
Okay. So for those of you who, well, we the membership renewal period will start in the mid-March. So at that point in time, you will get an email blast with a new updated membership form. And also we will have available the membership form on the website at that time. If you renew before then, it becomes a problem for next year's membership. I do want to tell you the national dues have been raised $5. There has been no change for our chapter dues and no change to the state dues. So the total cost for membership next year will be $90. And as I say, look for an email blast not until the middle of March, the new membership form. And if anybody has any questions or problems with that, please give me a call or please send me an email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. The newsletter deadline for the Valley View is Friday. No, that's not right. It says Friday the 19th, but we know the 19th is Saturday, Lunafest. So I guess that's the 18th is the deadline to submit your articles to Cynthia for the next Valley View. Polly, I do not have on my list that there may be a presentation during this meeting of the slate of officers.
Exactly.
Do you want to do that this meeting or is that a March issue?
No, it's this meeting issue and a March issue and an April mission.
Okay, well, go now.
So I'm pleased to announce that the board accepted the nominating slate at this last meeting in February. And I want to present the names to you and the positions. They are for co-president, Linda Enterline, BP membership, Jerry Peterson, membership elect, Donna Ray, program elect, Eileen Bond, treasurer, Annie Stitt, treasurer elect, Gail Garrison, recording secretary, Carolyn Morley, and corresponding secretary, Stacy Meyer. Now, I want you all to read your next Valley View newsletter. And during the next newsletter, you will see all these names and their positions, and you will see information that each one of these candidates provided for your information, which will help you because in March, we will be voting on this slate of members at our membership meeting.
Thank you, Polly.
You're welcome.
All right, well, our next general meeting is March 15th. And we will be viewing a program presented by a representative of the League of Women Voters regarding gerrymandering, which is really an important issue at this time. So thank you all for your presence today.
Susan, excuse me. Libby has her hand up. Excuse me.
Oh, I can't see that. I'm sorry.
Libby has her hand up.
Libby.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank those of you who came to this rally to end violence against women and girls this past Saturday. I think we counted close to about 70 people. So I would consider it a success. We had a gorgeous day. And I was pleased to see how many of us were actually dressed in red and purple. Signs were great. And I'm just very appreciative that those members of our branch who came out to support this. And sadly, we still need to do this. We still have a lot of work to do. And so that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Libby. And having been there, I would add that most of the support was extremely positive with honks and thumbs up. So I thought that was gratifying as well. So
One more hand up, Susan, Karen Lewick.
Karen Lewick.
Karen?
Yes. I would like to announce that after that rally, public policy is very happy that at our next meeting, we're going to have Cassette Thompson speak. And she is a consultant for the Center for Women's Global Leadership at Rutgers University. Her career includes academic and human rights work, including work for Amnesty.
Hello, come on in. I'm in the middle of a meeting. Sorry.
She has just completed her work on Silence and Omission, a media guide for covering gender-based violence, which is very appropriate for us following the rally. Our meeting's going to be March 10th at 10 o'clock in the morning. If any of you would like to hear her speak, and are not part of public policy, just send your wishes to me by email and I'll make sure that you get the invite. Thank you.
Okay,
Hi,
thank you.
this is Barb. Something is wrong with my screen, so I can't put my hand up, but I do have a question. I'd like to go back a ways. On the tickets for the quilt, I know that they will be sold at the Desert Meadows, but I drove by there one day and it was kind of a cold and windy day. So people may have been kind of huddled up. I couldn't find them. Could you give me some idea of where in Desert Meadows you're set up?
Yeah, can you hear me, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. At the gazebo, and we're not there every day. We've only been there on Monday or Wednesday a couple of times. So
Yeah,
it all depends on when you went.
I
Yeah.
did go within the right time. And
Okay, well,
I wasn't out of my car, so, maybe I needed
Oh.
to walk around, but I couldn't find you.
yeah, well, there's a large ramada. We're not there. The only other structure is a gazebo. It's, I can't really, it's in front of the fenced-in garden.
Oh, okay.
Can
We're
anybody
not going
else
to
think
be
of-
there, correct? So
We're going to be
we-
there Thursday
Oh, Thursday. Okay.
from 11 to 2.
Okay, thanks very
That'll be
much.
the last chance. Or as I said before, give me a call and we'll find a way to get the tickets for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any more hands up? I can't see.
No, you're good.
We're okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. And stay safe, stay well, and stay active in both mind and body as you are able. And we'll see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.